If you want to lose weight with intermittent fasting, you need to make a plan that you can stick to consistently. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how you do that. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making when they're trying to lose weight with intermittent fasting is that they don't really have a plan. And this was my big problem back in 2015. I knew about intermittent fasting, knew what it was, and I knew how to do it, but I wasn't really implementing a plan at all. I was just really inconsistent with it. It was like, well, sometimes I'll do, some fasting and I'll do it on these days, but I'm also gonna, try to eat fewer calories. And I'm also gonna, try to do macros and all this stuff. So I wasn't really consistently implementing a plan. But then in 2016, because I had gotten so frustrated, 2015, I lost like 15 pounds, but I was in the process of regaining that weight by the end of the year. And I thought, I've got to figure out something. So what I did was I sat down and actually made a plan, and I wrote it down and I committed to it. And that year I went from 205 down to about 157, 158. So it worked, but it's all about getting that plan. And I know it can seem intimidating because I was there and I didn't want to write down a plan and I didn't want to form a plan for myself in the beginning. Even though I wanted to succeed at weight loss, I was just really resistant to that idea. And that's really the first point here. It needs to be written down. And again, it's going to be difficult to get yourself to just sit down and write it down. And the reason I think we're resistant to this idea is that writing things down makes it real. It's like a commitment. It also puts in black and white what you're saying you're going to do. So then you can actually hold yourself accountable. Are you sticking to the plan or not? And that can be kind of scary because it's like, oh, I'll really know. Am I sticking to it or not? Like if you just kind of have it in your idea, this is kind of like in my head a lot in 2015, 2014, especially. I'm just going to eat less and move more, this really vague kind of thing. There's no real failure there because it's kind of like, well, I feel like I'm doing that, but it's not really in black and white. And, writing down the plan, not only does it help you to kind of commit, but also it makes it so that you can really remember what it was you said you were going to do. Because in my experience, I forget, especially in 2015, half the time I couldn't really tell you with any degree of certainty what I was committed to doing. It was just really vague. And then also it can help you keep track of what you've actually tried and for how long. And you can make little changes as you go along as you see you need to. But again, if you try to keep it all in your head, it's really difficult to do that. Basically impossible. But if you write it down, then you can really check against yourself. Now, before you actually write down the plan, let's talk about a couple of mindset type things that are really important. The first one is keep it simple. Ideally, you just want your plan to consist of a few bullet points, a few rules of what you are going to do in order to lose weight. And ideally, I would challenge you, be able to fit it on a Post-it note. This note right here is my plan that I did in 2016. This is what I did. And so I'll read it to you. It was intermittent fasting 6 days a week, cheat day on Sunday, walk 6 miles a day, and coffee with half and half whenever I want it. That was my plan. And it was really simple. And that's what I stuck with. And sure enough, that's what helped me to lose the weight. And the reason why it's nice to have it on a Post-it note is because it makes you whittle down your rules to really the most important things. And it makes it so that it's easy to know, are you sticking to your plan or not? Because if you make yourself a whole laundry list of rules, it's going to be hard to stick with. And it's going to be kind of hard to know on a day-to-day basis, are you really sticking with this? Or are you just kind of not really following the plan? And it also makes it harder to know as you go along, what maybe you can safely eliminate. Because, it's hard to live with a lot of rules for a really long time. So if you start out with a lot of rules and it's working, then it's going to be harder as you go along to be like, well, I don't really need to do that anymore. But instead, just keep it really simple and live by those simple rules. Now, the next thing is keep it easy. Now, this is very difficult for me. I tend to be the type of person who just makes things hard on herself. And, I don't know why I do that. I feel like that's just kind of how I'm built. But so what I found was, in 2016, I was really frustrated because I thought, I've struggled with weight my entire life. Why is this so difficult? Why can't I solve this problem? And I heard some advice around this time. Tim Ferriss said, on like a podcast or something, think about the question, what would this look like if it were easy? And so that's what I did. I thought, okay, maybe I need to make weight loss easy. Like maybe I'm making it too hard, which was so counterintuitive because I thought since I had struggled with it my whole life, it must be difficult. Like, why else would I struggle with it? But just having that shift in my mindset, like, well, maybe I'm just making it too hard. Like, maybe it really can be easy. So when I sat down to write down my plan, I thought, okay, what would be easy? And those are the rules I came up with. Like, okay, 6 days a week doing intermittent fasting. I can do that. I need to have a day off, or I want to have a day off. So maybe that'll make it easy enough. And eating whatever I want. Okay, I want to be able to eat whatever I want. I think that would be pretty easy. And same with walking too. Like, okay, I know I can't always get the motivation up to go for a run, but I can certainly go walk. Now, another thing that might help you is, if you're having kind of a little bit of trouble when thinking about what would be easy, instead you might ask yourself, okay, in the past, when I've been on a diet and then I've fallen off the wagon, what did that look like? What was the thing that kept tripping me up? And like for me personally, what I saw was in the short term, I really could do the whole like getting rid of an entire food group type thing. Like I'm not going to have any dessert, or I'm not going to have any fruit, or I'm not going to, but eventually what would happen is I would have a really bad day, like just something would make me upset or whatever. And what would I do? I would really want, a cookie or, chocolate cake, something like that. And then I would eat the thing, and then it was all over, because it was like, this is what I want life to be like. I want to be able to have these things in my life. So I learned from that. It's like, okay, so I'm going to function better if I can have those things. And for me, when I was looking at intermittent fasting, I thought, I feel like I could really stick with that if I just knew, like, yes, I can have whatever I want, but just in this, eating window period of time. But maybe you've not been on a diet before and this is like your first go around with weight loss. Try thinking about how you are on your days where you're just tired. So maybe it's not a terrible day, but just a day that you're tired. What do you think you'll be able to stick to on those days? I mean, those are the types of days. It's easy when you're setting goals and making plans to think about your best day and like my ideal day. I'm firing on all cylinders and here's what I'm able to do. But so many of our days we're tired, or we're upset about something, or little things pop up during the day. So it's better to make your plan based on reality, like those days are going to be more challenging to be on a plan, so that you can stick to them on those days and on those great days where you're firing on all cylinders and everything's going perfectly. Now, the last thing to remember before you write down your plan is to be honest. Be honest with yourself about what foods you like and what foods you hate, and about what you don't want your life to look like. It's really easy to kind of like listen to all the diet and exercise experts out there and to try to convince yourself that that's what you want your life to look like. But instead, just be honest. Like what do you really want to do for the rest of your life? Because that's the thing, when you're thinking about weight loss, you should also be thinking about doing this plan or some version of it for the rest of your life. And so, think about those things. Like, what do you really want it to be like? Because eventually you'll get down to your goal weight. And so you're going to want to stay down at your goal weight. So, what will your life need to look like? And likely it's going to need to look something like what you're doing right now to get the weight off. And for me, that's where things like cheat day came in. I thought, really, I do want a day off. Like, I don't foresee me doing, 7 days a week, never having breakfast, like that was not going to be sustainable. So that's why I worked that into my plan. Same thing with coffee with half and half. I mean, I probably could have learned the self-discipline to just never have that during my fasting window. But I was honest with myself and I said, I want that though. I want to have the type of plan where I can have coffee whenever I want it. And, just being honest with myself was really helpful because it helped me to create a plan that really, truly worked, that I really, truly enjoyed doing. Now, let's talk about how to write your actual plan. First, you need to pick your fasting window. Like how long do you want to fast each day? Now, I would recommend that you pick one and just stick with it. So in other words, and pick the same time each day if your schedule will possibly allow for that, just because it makes it easier on yourself, because then you just know, like, okay, I eat between these hours each day. And it helps your body too, because your body comes to expect food at a certain time, and then also comes to not expect food at a certain time. Now, of course, if you've got a really weird schedule and you just can't do that, that's fine. You'll make it work some other way. But, just as far as what's the easiest thing is to pick a certain time during the day where you do your eating and just stick with that throughout the week. So, for example, if you want to do a 16-8, so that's an 8-hour eating window, 16-hour of fasting, then you could just say, okay, I'm going to eat between the hours of 12 and 8 each day, or between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. each day. It just depends on what you want to do. But if you just do that, it just makes it so much easier. Now, and once you have your windows picked out, you need to figure out what your rules are, if any, for the eating window. So for me, I don't have any rules as far as, for myself. I just said I eat whatever I want during the eating window. If you are going to restrict some sort of food, which I found for me that didn't work for me, I don't like doing that because I only will crave those things that I'm trying to restrict myself from. It was this weird counterintuitive thing that happened when I just said I can have anything, then I suddenly had self-control. But if you're going to have certain rules, write those down so that you can remember, okay, I'm committed to doing this. And then also you're going to want to write down your rules for the fasting windows. So, for me, I said coffee whenever I want it. You maybe are going to allow yourself some other type of drink, but write that down so that you can remember, yes, I am doing this. I am allowed to have this certain thing during the fasting window. Or you might choose to be really, really strict during the fasting window. It's really all about what works for you. Now, the last thing is to write down any exercise that you're planning to do. For me, I chose walking 6 miles a day. That was just because for me, that's what I could see myself doing consistently. And I would encourage you that if you do want to do some form of exercise, it's not mandatory. Plenty of people lose weight with no exercise at all. But when you're thinking about which exercises, go for things you're going to enjoy that you'll stick with instead of just focusing on like calorie burn. I found for myself, just like I can't keep that motivation, day in, day out for years on end when it comes down to just calorie burn. But when it comes down to just something I can enjoy and that I feel good about, for me, that's walking. And so once you have that written down, you have your plan. You've made a plan. Now, the next part is the most important part, and that is actually implementing the plan, which includes tracking and tweaking. So implementing the plan, you just do what you said you're going to do. You just, if you said you're going to fast between the hours of this time and this time, you just do that day in, day out. I have found it's helpful to do something for 6 weeks before you make any changes at all. So in the first 6 weeks, now, especially if you're a beginner, if you've never done any intermittent fasting at all, I would highly recommend that instead of just jumping to a 16-8 or something like that, that you first just learn how to do intermittent fasting. So start out with something really simple, really short window. I started out just saying, I'm not going to eat between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. But you may have something different that you want to do. But I would just say, start with a really short fasting window. Don't worry about weight loss at first. Just focus on learning how to fast, and then push your window out a little further. For me, it helped to just push breakfast a little later, kept that 10 p.m. Boundary up, and then just push breakfast later and later until eventually I got to where my first meal is no longer breakfast, it's lunch, and then pushing lunch out a little bit later. Because most people tend to find that at about 16-8, that's when they start to lose weight. Though some people do better with shorter fasting windows, and some don't really have weight loss results until a little bit longer of a fasting window. So you've implemented it. You also need to be tracking your results. So if you're wanting to lose weight, you should be tracking your weight. And what I do is I weigh myself every morning and I keep track of my 7-day average. Now, even your 7-day average will fluctuate a little bit. That's what weight does. It's not the same every single day. And even when you're losing weight, it's not a straight line down. It kind of goes up and down and up and down. And it's just over time, you can see that trend. And 6 weeks is a good length of time to be able to see that trend. So you want to track your weight. And you'll learn a lot about, what your body does and things like throughout the month. So just don't worry too much about weight loss right off the bat. Like even if you've done it really consistently for a week, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see any meaningful weight loss. And weight loss is generally slower than most people tend to think that it is. Like for me, about a pound a week on average is what I lost when I was doing intermittent fasting, when I had the most weight to lose. And then even when I got down to like a normal BMI, it was a third of a pound a week on average. So it was really, really slow. So you really do need to be tracking as you're being very consistent. Now, if you find that, you've been trying this plan that you wrote down and you just aren't being consistent with it, then you need to sit down and make it easier. And that can be difficult. It can maybe be a humbling experience. I've had to do that before in the past with, different things. Like if I'm experimenting with one thing, especially in maintenance, I'll think, oh, well, this will be super easy. And then I'll think, oh no, I really do want it to be a little bit easier than what I've made it on myself. So don't worry. If you need to make a change, it's okay. Just make it easier until you find that spot where you can really be consistent. Because consistency is the thing that will get the weight off, being consistent with your plan. Now, on the other hand, if you find that you were really consistent for 6 weeks and nothing happened, then you need to sit down and figure out what you should do, right? So the first thing is to ask yourself, do you really need to lose weight? A lot of women struggle with body dysmorphia or just, this perception that they need to lose weight when really they're at a perfectly healthy weight. So you can do some objective measuring, like you could weigh yourself and look at your height and then just look at your BMI. And if you're in a normal BMI and, you could maybe look at other weight and height charts for women and do some measurements like around your abdomen and stuff, you may find that you're just at a healthy weight and your body just doesn't need to lose weight. On the other hand, you may find that, you really do need to lose weight. Like, maybe you are obese and there is definitely weight there to lose. Well, then you can look at your plan again and then just ask yourself, what's a tiny change that you could make that might help the scale start to move? So you are going to increase the difficulty level just a little bit, but don't do too much. Don't just like throw out the whole plan and start over. Just, make a little tweak. For example, you could make your fasting window just a little bit longer and see if that starts to move the needle. Or you could try something like cutting out snacks. Some people tend to be grazers. And in my experience, so many times, snacking was truly emotional eating. I just didn't recognize it at the time for myself. So I tend not to snack anymore because I know that about myself now. Or, another small tweak might be that you're just going to work on slowing down your eating. So when you sit down, you're really mindful. You pay attention to every bite that you take, and you literally just try to slow down the process that you're using when you eat. And so then as you go along, just continue to make tweaks. You will find, I'm sure, that as you go along, especially as you're hitting your goals and then you get down to your goal weight, you're probably going to want to sit down and just tweak things a bit for maintenance. Maybe you will say, okay, I want to be a little bit more loosey-goosey. That's how I am. I'm like, okay, now that I'm at the weight I want to be at, I want to have a bit more freedom, but I still want to stay in this certain range. So, it's a whole process of like just tweaking things. And I, to this day, continue to sit down with my plan and tweak things as I go along. Remember that it's not set in stone. It's all about finding what will work for you and what will give you long-term success with weight loss. So I hope that helps you. I hope right now, if you are kind of feeling stuck, but you don't have a plan, that you'll sit down and write one down and then, go about the process of just implementing that plan. Keep tracking, keep comparing, what kind of results are you having and are you being consistent with the plan? And then, make little tweaks as you see they're necessary. Okay, thank you for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one.